I am mining investor and editor of Resource Stock Digest, Gerardo Del Real here with my partner, Mr. Nick Hodge, who is also an investor, publisher of Daily Profit Cycle, and a bunch of other things. This is the 288th episode of our weekly therapy session that we call Investing in Bizarro World. We're going to talk markets, we're going to talk gold, we're going to talk inflation, we're going to talk about hurricanes and all the crazy stuff going on around the world. Always plenty to get to, but first and foremost, Senor Hodge, how are you this week? How are you today? How goes the family?
Family is great, so that's good. It's duck season, so that's great. It's also tax season, so not so good. So, yin and yang as the universe goes. How are you, Gerardo?
I'm great. It's also tax season here, so, I hate writing those checks, but that is what it is. As far as duck season goes, I guess great for the ducks, right? Not so great for the ducks, great for you. But that's how it goes. But no, let's get right into it. Overall indices, thoughts on the overall indices and where they are. We seem to be kind of like on a wait and see kind of lull. And obviously some of that's got to be tied into the election to see the direction that things are going to take. We're going to talk betting odds in a second because I know you watch those pretty closely. But thoughts on the overall market?
Everything you say is true. I've been saying for a couple of weeks, it's been wait and see. That correlations were all over the place as it related to the dollar and gold and oil, and there was inverse correlations and then positive correlations. And yeah, I think the market was trying to and continues to figure things out. And the uncertainty is easy to attribute to the election, which is now just a couple of weeks away. I got my pamphlet in the mail this week. We'll maybe talk about it a little bit more as we get into the ranty section of this podcast.
Sure.
The stock market indices are at all-time highs. The S&P is at all-time record highs. I told you a couple of weeks ago not to count out tech yet. Tech is now leading again for the past month. I would attribute that to just loose policy, right? You had a 50 basis point cut in September on our side of the pond. On the other side of the pond, China also is now getting out their stimulus bazookas. If you look at Chinese equities, they've been going up pretty precipitously, and some folks that are more familiar and more intimate with China seem to think there's more stimulus on the way from that country, which is a pretty big one. So, all that combined is why equities are at all-time highs, and that takes care of the sort of the S&P. And you're in this sort of, yes, it was uncertain to begin with and sideways to begin with, but, it just in the past week here, you have, rates ticking back up and gold ticking back down. So you're really inside uncertainty within the uncertainty, which I think is a good opportunity to add to gold if you haven't yet. Specifically gold stocks, not just the commodity, and maybe we can talk more about that in a little bit. There's some sector-specific things that have happened that are starting to crystallize the value there and then show the generalists that there's money to be made. But, other than that, I don't know is probably a good place to end it. The dollar has been gaining some strength, rates back up a little bit, as I already said. And so I think the trend overall is going to be rates back down. I think you do get another cut as we head into the fall. And so I think what you would have this week is sort of something that's counter to the prevailing trend, if you have to put it in market speak.
Well, let's talk. There was a lot there. The one I want to touch on is the most consequential one for the sector that I dabble in exclusively, that being the resource space, and that is Chinese stimulus. Expected to have another round of stimulus as early as this weekend. They are meeting to discuss that. And as I've said many, many times, the one thing about a dictatorship is that they arrive to conclusions pretty quickly, and that shit tends to happen immediately, right? There is no hand-holding, there is no lobbying, there isn't any of that. I want to lower rates. The rates are going to get lowered. I want to stimulate the electric vehicle sector. We're going to stimulate the electric vehicle sector. So I think the policy decisions that we get maybe as early as this weekend are going to be pretty consequential, especially for a commodity market that clearly is also in wait-and-see mode. And it is interesting to me that we've had bifurcated markets in the past, and right now everything kind of seems to be walking in step, right? Even with markets that don't typically correlate, right? The tech stocks, the Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ, pretty well correlated right now with copper, with gold, with silver, with minor retracements, but nothing that breaks through technically or breaks down technically. And consolidations that look to me like they're getting ready to kind of do a trampoline move higher if we get the right outcome, whatever that right outcome is election-wise. Let's get into the commodity space. Gold and silver, thoughts there. We had a pullback to the 2600 level, 2606. We're at 2630 now. Silver fell below, didn't hold 32 again, but dropped below 31, was back in the 30s, and then pushed right back up above that 31 level. You mentioned last week silver really had to hold that 31 level. It did so beautifully. Gold held 2600 beautifully. How are you feeling about those two?
Yeah, those are sort of the lower ends of the recent trends, and they held where they needed to hold. Gold could go to 2600 and still be bullish, and quickly go to 2700. While you sleep one night, and then you shouldn't be surprised to wake up to that. So the trend is bullish for both of those metals. If you look at I want to talk more about the equities. We talked more about the technical levels of the metals prices themselves last week. Equities are starting to move a little bit. Like GDXJ looks good. GDX looks good. I own a silver ETF in Foundational Profits that owns some silver producers. There's been some acquisitions there recently. Maybe we can get a little bit into that.
Yes.
And the silver equities look good. So content to buy on this pullback. That's what I was saying sort of in that first answer, with the 10-year yield ticking higher and the 2-year yield ticking higher, and then the dollar strength here. And you mentioned gold going down to 2600. It's given, I won't say a sell-off, but definitely they've gone down. They've closed red and not green for a couple of days, and that gives you an opportunity, like I said, to buy or add. So I feel good about the gold space, and then I think there's opportunities to allocate capital there in a smart way too. I mean, I'm not sure what to say. Like, earnings season is coming up. You'll have this company starting to report at the end of October and getting into November. Those are going to be good earnings reports. You have
They better
regional
be.
things.
Record high gold prices, motherfuckers.
You have regional things going on with, certain, African countries that are affecting some of the major producers. And so it really narrows the list of what you get to choose from, right? And so, I mean, I was looking at Agnico Eagle the other day. I mean, there's opportunities out there in big stocks is what I'm saying. And so silver and gold look good. You want to talk any more about acquisitions or anything like that?
I do. I mean, Core Mining just acquired Silvercrest for $1.7 billion. There most definitely is an appetite for silver producers. Los Gatos recently was taken out for a hefty sum. I also want to talk Mexican politics and the new president, the first female president. There seems to be improved sentiment around the fact that it doesn't appear the newly elected president and newly sworn in president is going to uphold what was feared to be an open pit mining ban. There looks to be softer language and rhetoric as to honoring existing permits and being thoughtful about reviewing for new permits. And that is hugely bullish for a country that obviously near and dear to my heart. It's where my parents were born and raised, and it's my ancestry, right? But for a country that has done itself zero favors in many, 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 many areas, I'll keep it to making money, has not done itself any favor in attracting investment, and has chased away quite a bit of capital with the uncertainty regarding policy and ownership and title as it relates to a lot of, the ejidos and land rights, surface rights, and potential mines. Hard to run a business when you're not sure if you'll even be in business, and hard to really budget, a capex of $500 million to $2 billion if you're a company looking to build something significant when you don't know if it's going to get taken away or outlawed, right? So, yes, exactly. Almaden has one of the best silver gold deposits I've seen, right? Relatively easy to mine, great economics, could justify $1 billion market cap, NPV at least in this market with today's prices, and yet the market cap sits, I'll tell you, because I still keep it on my ticker just to remind myself to stay humble, $8.91 million. I mean,
$8 million.
$8 million. That was, a beautiful threesome between the NGOs and the Mexican government, tag teaming Almaden to chase it the fuck out of Mexico, which is exactly what it did. It wasn't just Almaden that left, it's also Almadex. Now, I should say that Almaden is in arbitration right now, but then I'd get sidetracked, and I don't want to do that to you folks. I want to bring it back to the fact that there clearly is an appetite at this point in the cycle where producers with healthy balance sheets are using that balance sheet to bolster reserves, and clearly they see opportunity in just buying ounces as opposed to exploring for them, right?
I mean, yeah, and I would probably just go right to lithium.
I was going to.
in this transition, because that's probably pretty good on silver and gold. We obviously have recommendations there, reports, and we talk about those a lot. And we've also talked about lithium a lot, but lithium has been tougher. And so I spent a little bit of time writing about it in my monthly issue this week. And so I guess I'm prepared to talk about it in that respect because I was looking up a couple of things. And so, it's been the round trip ticket at this point for the lithium price, from $10,000 before 2021-ish up to $80,000 and now back down to $10,000. I was looking at, it's funny, the AI is starting to get a little useful. I was asking the AI what Ford's electric vehicle targets were in 2021, and it was, telling me all the things, right? It was going to sell, 30% of its vehicles by 2030 were going to be electric. It was going to, launching the electric Mustang and the F-150 and this, that, and the other thing. And then I said, have Ford's EV plans changed since 2021? And then it gave me the bullet points: canceled $12 billion in investment, delayed the launch of the F-150 new model, this, that, and the other thing, right? And so, and then that was just Ford, right? What I'm saying here is you're seeing a bottoming process, and that's what bottoming is. It's a process. And you're seeing the cyclicality of resource markets. It's easy to see in retrospect, of course, but that's what I'm seeing. I'm doing Monday morning quarterbacking. I'm looking in my rearview mirror. And you can see how the process played out from these exuberant targets, and we're building these factories, and we're announcing this, to we're shuttering this, or we're closing this, and we're writing off this investment. So a couple of other things have happened, I guess, recently that point to bottom stuff, like Northvolt, which used to be talked about in a very positive light, is one of its units is going bankrupt. That's a Swedish battery maker. And then you've had some of the other ones go bye-bye, right? Like Lordstown is gone, Fisker is gone. And so that's what I mean by a bottoming process. And then what happens? The cure for low prices is low prices, as Rick Rule says. And then so while we were in Beaver Creek, you got the Chinese, I never say it right, lepidolite announcement.
Lepidolite.
Where they were taking the low-cost production off. That was CATL, the big Chinese, chemical battery producer. And then the big thing that happened in the past week was, Rio Tinto came out and said that they were going to buy Arcadium lithium. And Arcadium's a name I've talked about here. I won't rehash the whole thing, but we have shares, or I had shares, because it was Orocobre, which merged with Livent, and we had Orocobre from Advantage Lithium, because we've been doing this whole lithium thing since 2017 or before.
A little bit, folks, a little bit ahead of that curve.
So I lost my train of thought for a second, because I was thinking about the conspiracy theories about how the feds are sending hurricanes to North Carolina to take the lithium production, something or another. Like, shit's crazy out there, Gerardo. Anyway,
we're going to talk about it. Yeah, shit is crazy out there.
So bottoming process for lithium was the point of that whole little rehashing exercise I just did. And then you have prices starting to tick back up from $10,000 a pound of lithium carbonate to, I think I was checking this week, $10,008, $10,009. You have people starting to auction, and prices, the spot prices are getting auctioned higher than the prices you see out of the media or on the charts. And then you see, robust EV sales. We were just talking about Chinese stimulus. They're going to stimulate the EV sales and things like that. And so then it starts to ascend again, right? And you look at a chart of like LIT, which is the lithium and EV sort of ETF, like one of the main barometers of the industry. And, all of a sudden it's up some 30% in the past month or so, right?
Sure.
And so that industry is starting to change, and that's what I wanted to get out. I don't know if you have anything to add on the lithium side of things.
No, look, I think it's worth noting the Rio Tinto buy of Arcadium is a $6.7 billion. That's U.S. investment. That is not a lightweight offer, right? A large motivation for that takeout offer was the technology, the extraction technology that Arcadium possesses. And, I actually listened to the conference call and went through the presentation, the takeout presentation. Some really, really interesting points in there, right? The CEO was quick to mention that the goal is to become, a top lithium producer ASAP, and that the future for lithium for the next 20 years is extremely bright, and that supply deficits should start materializing as early as next year or the year after. And that's anticipating that all of the supply that we anticipate to come online continues to come online. I say that to say the lithium cycle is a vicious one. It's vicious to the upside. It's nasty to the downside. I think we got the downside part out of the way. things are starting to move up. We've had several companies that, like you mentioned, have surged over the past several weeks. But there was a small tidbit, and I wrote about it for Daily Profit Cycle, where if you want to see us write about things, you go to dailyprofitcycle.com/subscribe. But I wrote an editorial there, and it talked on small line that was included in the press conference. And the detail from the Rio Tinto CEO was that they plan on continuing to establish battery hubs in Argentina and Quebec, right? And obviously, if you're going to talk Quebec, you have to talk James Bay. And if you're going to talk James Bay, we'll save it for the end of the show. But everybody knows who my two top picks are in that region. Was interesting to me that one of those companies reacted positively initially, then gave us no news for what seems like the 7th week in a row. And so that immediately made a U-turn. The other company, meanwhile, is up some 200-something% here on the back of some phenomenal results, with more phenomenal results anticipated. And I think that company has a lot of room to run. But it was interesting to me that Rio Tinto was very clear that they absolutely plan on investing on a larger scale on infrastructure in Quebec. And again, you have to go James Bay if you're going to go in that area. Having two world-class deposits, what appear to be two world-class deposits in that region, makes it very much simpler for a board of directors to greenlight multi-billion-dollar acquisitions and infrastructure development. So exciting times for James Bay, exciting times for Quebec, and exciting times for lithium investors if they could have a little bit of patience with some of these names that have been absolutely taken to the woodshed, right?
It takes time, and jurisdiction matters. So that's the last thing I'd say there is you mentioned how long it takes to get these projects online. One of the reasons that Rio Tinto is hunting in South America and then mentioning Quebec is one of their main projects that they had put a lot of hopes and capital into is in Siberia, right? This Jadar project, which we've talked about in this podcast before, and said that it had been facing local opposition, right? And so yeah, there might be a ton of lithium, literally, or 100 tons of it, or whatever it is, right? But if you can't get it out of the ground, and if it faces, local opposition, then you got to find it somewhere else, and that's probably in a place where it's already being produced, and where locals and government are supportive of building projects. So Quebec certainly has that going for it.
Couldn't agree
What
more.
else?
Couldn't agree more. No, I think on the lithium space, that covers that. I think as far as silver and gold, we're pretty clear on where we stand there. Copper flirted with 440, closed closer to 430 today, 432 last I checked. Dollar strength, you mentioned the dollar index surpassed the 103 level before retreating just below that level. I think, again, that the decision from China, maybe as early as this weekend, as I mentioned, is going to be pretty consequential as far as the copper price. But there's other drivers there, right, where it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Thoughts on the copper price technically? Same as last week.
It's the same as last week.
Yeah,
We'll see what China says. I want to see real growth, which I also said last week.
Yep.
I spent more time looking at the names this week, which means I feel like I'm missing out. Like I can feel it. Like I should buy some copper stocks. But then I'll just tell you my whole thought process. Maybe you'll start paying for it on this podcast. Then I look at the ETFs I hold and that I've recommended, including the silver one I mentioned, and some of the biggest holdings in that are like Evolution Mining, for example. And so like I click over to the copper ETF, and that's also in there. And so I technically have the copper exposure, right? Maybe not direct on the large cap side, no Freeports, no Southerns, no BHPs right now. And then obviously have it on the smaller side. But copper is bullish, mainly for stimulus reasons now. I would like to see some actual economic growth and not the financial engineering. But I'm bullish on copper and obviously own it.
Excellent. Lastly, uranium, and then I want to talk financial engineering.
Yeah, so I didn't prepare any uranium notes. I feel like we've talked about it a lot too. All the fundamentals continue to be in line. Continues to gain acceptance. Continues to now be the thing that's driving forward the AI, the thing that they need, the tech side coalescing around it. It's now a Silicon Valley idea, which pissed me off a little bit initially. Like, oh, tech's, new idea to save. It's like, okay, it's tech's idea, right? But anyway, they can have it if they're going to take the ball and run with it. So I think uranium is looking good. You had the ISO acquisition of Anfield, I guess it was, to put the mill into their portfolio. That company's looking all right. Yeah, a lot to like in the uranium space. We were talking the other week how we wrote a check into a new company that's with an old team that we've had success with before. So, yeah, a lot to like in the uranium space, but nothing new to add from my side of it.
I like it. Same, by the way. I feel the exact same way I have felt and will feel. I am waiting to see more utilities step off the sideline and get in there and start contracting at higher prices. I think we're going to see higher prices in relatively short order. You said financial engineering, and you know my brain, right? Immediately it went to the TD Ameritrade story. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that.
No, I saw it on the sheet, though. Tell me.
So the headlines are great, right? Here comes the part where I curse and rant and rave, everybody. The markets part of this podcast is done until we'll give you some stock picks later on and some stock-specific news. So what happens if, let's say, my friends are all in a cartel and I own a bank and my friends come in and I take their money and I say, well, I know you guys. You guys are great guys. I kind of know what you do, but you know what? I'll take care of that problem for you. You now have legal money, right? What that happens to me and my friends? Right. So that is where I was going. So what would happen to me and my friends, if it was just me and my friends, is I would go to prison, and rightfully so. My friends would go to prison, and rightfully so, because it is fucking illegal to launder money, and it's really fucking illegal to launder money for criminal organizations, be it cartels, be it terrorist organizations, be it whatever. So when I read that TD Bank pleaded guilty in a criminal, not a civil, in a criminal money laundering case and agreed to pay, I'm using their words now, a whopping $3 billion in fines and other penalties to the Department of Justice and federal financial regulators to settle a probe over its failure to monitor money laundering by drug cartels, fucking headline drives me livid. First off, they didn't pay $3 billion in fines to settle a probe. They bribed the Department of Justice to not send their ass to prison, is what they did. And it wasn't because of their failure to monitor money laundering by the drug cartels. The fucking money laundering was being done by TD Ameritrade, right? And so it's that type of stuff that drives me up the wall because, again, the average Jose, the average Pancho, the average Michael, the average Nick, and the average Gerardo sure in the fuck couldn't buy our way out of a drug cartel money laundering case. Certainly not at this level. The only way that we're able to do that is if we have the kind of bankroll, lobbyists, and corporate power to be able to settle a probe about the illegal things that the cartel groups were doing. It's a bunch of hypocrisy. It's bullshit at its finest, and that's why at the end of the day, who you vote for, we'll talk about that in a second here in this election, is not going to be as consequential as you think when it relates to that. It is consequential in other ways, immigration, a bunch of other things, women's rights, reproductive rights, definitely consequential on that front. But when it comes to this type of stuff, zero will change, folks. It's not going to change until you take the money out of the politics. You can't take the money out of the politics without removing the lobbyists. And you can't do that unless you have some term limits and you have bars and regulations around timelines when a politician or a member of a bank can do the other thing, right? Which is the shuffle that goes on. The financial people become the politicians after they make their money, and then they pass the laws that are beneficial to the financial people so they can make their money, and then vice versa, right? The bank people become the financial people, and then they go make their money, and it's one big circle jerk.
I'm so jaded that I don't even want to talk about it sometimes. And again, I founded a whole division on this and why it affects you and how you're not in the insider club. And so, yeah, I mentioned HSBC immediately because that bank was, in fact, caught laundering money for terrorists some number of years ago, right? This is nothing new. This is what banks do. And last week I was talking about Nate Silver's new book and how people like you and I are in the river and we're outside those people that work in the corner offices at TD Ameritrade and the people that work in the corner offices at the Justice Department, right? Because those people that work in the corner offices at the Justice Department make their six figures but don't really contribute, make, or grow or, deliver anything to society that's useful other than taking a check from someone who made money laundering money for terrorists, right? So in essence, you just got your government getting funding by taking a cut of cartel money or whatever it was, right? And of course, that should piss you off because those are public officials and those are regulated banks that are regulated by officials that you pay tax dollars to. And I, too, start thinking about elections and tax dollars because you and I pay taxes, and you and I just filed our taxes this month. And I was telling you, and it's nothing new, that we have a high tax bill and there's not a lot of wiggle room to write things off. So a little bit of comedic levity, right? Like people tell me all the time about write-offs and how either they're writing things off or how I can write things off. And I just smile inside and I think you either don't know what you're talking about, or you've never really owned a business, or your business isn't making that much money. You're writing it off to be negative or something like that. Anyway, and so I've been complaining about write-offs. Sorry, this is a little bit of verbal diarrhea.
No. This is timely. It's tax season. We're about to write 6 and 7 figure tax checks, man. I'm not happy about it either.
I told you the other week that I bought a car, and the dealer asked what I did, and it came out that I was a business owner, and he says, oh, you could just write it off. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, I could just write it off. Sure. Like, I'm just going to write this fucking car off. That's how it works, right? So I was telling my wife about this, and she sends me, I guess there's a comedy show called Schitt's Creek with the levies.
Yeah.
And the son is, the dad is some sort of businessman or something or another, and the son is he's buying all these things, and he's telling his dad he's going to write them off, right? He buys like a massage chair and a juicer, and because it's for his health, he's telling his dad like, I'm just going to write it off, Dad. And the dad is like, you're going to write it off? Like, do you know how that fucking works? Like, that's not how that works, man. And so that's what I'm thinking when people are telling me that I can just write things off of my taxes. And that's what I'm thinking about when TD Ameritrade gets to make however many. They clearly made more than $3 billion, right? Doing whatever it is they were doing. And this is just their fine, right? So that's what I've been saying for a decade now, that these banks, large institutions, whatever it is, and any corporation that's at the highest tier, fertilizer, defense industry, bank, whatever it is that has a lobbyist, like you said, that has someone that worked in the Justice Department or some equivalent agency that oversaw that industry, right? Someone in the FAA that oversaw the airlines, or someone in the EPA that oversaw a chemical company. It's just rotation, right? And sometimes it's on purpose. Like I've even written about over the years, sometimes companies, specifically in the accounting industry, like the KPMGs and the Deloittes and the T. Rowe's, they will send people to the government for a couple of years just to learn how it works, just to learn how the laws are written, and then they'll hire them back so that they can exploit the system, right? Like, this is a known phenomenon. This is how your system works. And it's why people like us, people that listen to this podcast, and people who understand what we do and pay us for our information, want to be independent and sovereign. They don't want to be a part of whatever it is that is, right?
Yep.
Like that go-round system. And it's just so interesting, right? Like, I know people who are part of that, right? And it's, you got to kiss ass, and you got to suck up, and you got to put on your fucking loafers and go to the tea party with the congressman's fucking daughter. Like, fuck that shit, man. That's not the life like I want to live. And it's not a conspiracy, is what I learned over the years. Like,
it's just the way the game is played.
Exactly right. And if you don't understand it, or if you're not in it, it's very easy to see it as a conspiracy. But it's just, they all have a vested interest. They all go to the same elite schools, send their kids to the same prep schools, and so the TD golf or the TD CEO. I'm just making this up, right? His kids probably go to school with someone from the Justice Department. That's just what I'm saying,
Sure.
right? Like that. I'm just as an example. And that's why people are so jaded with the system. So I'm not really sure where to take it from there, except to say that I ignore some of that stuff for a large part now, because we've got ourselves to a place where, fortunately, we can just ignore it and it doesn't affect us as much. But when you talk about the debt and the bloat and the revolving door and whatever it is that you can't put your finger on that makes things cost more and processes take longer and regulations and red tape make projects unfeasible. Like, that's what it is. Like, that's that cancerous cabal of elitists that are making decisions and letting people off the hook as they continue to grease each other's palms, scratch each other's backs, and then go play 18 holes on the clubhouse on Sunday, right? And I know this to be true. Last thing, I've talked for a while, but like, I watch Meet the Press more than I should, and Lindsey Graham was on the other day, and he's the classic bipartisan, kiss whoever's ass he needs to kiss in his party to get whatever it is he needs to keep his Senate job and his salary, right? Like, he's the classic chicken hawk fucking guy, right? And he's asked a question about Kamala and the election, and he does his little rant about his pre-prepared remarks about Kamala's so bad, she's going to drive up the taxes and the debt, she hasn't been good for us. And then as soon as his remarks are done that he had in his head, he just starts laughing. Like it just switched off, right? Like everything was like a joke after he got out his remarks. Like fuck you, man.
Yeah, I did myself not a favor by watching a movie called Dark Waters a couple of weeks ago. And if you haven't seen Dark Waters, it's a phenomenal movie starring Mark Ruffalo, and it's based on a true story. It's on Netflix, and it's about the chemical giant DuPont, which was polluting drinking
They were raping
water.
3-year-olds. The DuPonts were raping 3-year-olds for a while.
Well, that was the DuPont family, and yeah. So this is the DuPont family's company, which was knowingly polluting drinking water, and the cancer rates and the amount of babies that were being born deformed. Many were the employees of the company, and for decades they knew about it and covered it up. And the way they covered it up was the same way that you just mentioned, right? You know the person over here, you know the person at the EPA, you grease enough pockets. Cancer for babies, fuck it. Cancer for a pregnant woman, it just comes with the territory. Anything for profits, right? But phenomenal movie if y'all haven't seen it, called Dark Waters, not to be confused with Dark Water, which is some crazy horror thriller film with Jennifer Connelly, who I really like. But Dark Waters, awesome movie. The last thing, anecdotal. I mentioned Chapel Roan last week, and
Yes, you did.
the young lady and her political views, and how she was just basically disappointed that she had to vote for anyone at all in this election. You know, she clearly had, her side picked, but she wasn't really content with the options. So my wife and I went to Austin City Limits Music Festival, and she happened to be the headliner one of those days among 4 headliners that were on kind of at the same time. She broke, her message is clearly resonating. She broke the record for festival goers. It was, just Google Chapel Roan Austin City Limits Music Festival. It was absolutely bonkers, the amount of people that were there to see that young lady. So the message is resonating. That outsider mentality of the system is rigged against the most of us is absolutely resonating. And again, me being the optimist gives me a little hope for the future. I think the youngins are gonna, continue to pull us in a different direction. And then the process of change always is slow until it's not. Let's see what the next few years have in store for us.
It's coming.
Oh,
wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Sturgill Simpson was there too. You showed me. And
absolutely demolished
pretty
his
good.
Oh, it was my favorite performance of the weekend. I know you hate texting. I had to text you. I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it, and I was like, oh my God.
He's
Just
awesome, yeah.
Brilliant guitar playing, brilliant writing, brilliant voice. His band was killing it. It was just beautiful. Top-notch performance, top to bottom, and it was amazing.
Good. Glad you got to go.
Yes, sir. Lucky to be able to have gone. Let's get back to markets. Let's get to the part of the podcast where we get into company-specific news. Companies that finally are starting to deliver. The market is starting to notice. Let's start with Aldebaran. It's a company both you and I cover in our paid letters, and they actually haven't had news since
They have not.
I want to say late July. But clearly the scale of the copper gold asset that they have in Argentina is getting to be significant enough, and with the resource update and estimate pending that will materially increase that resource. I think the market is starting to front run that, and obviously copper and gold prices being where they're at makes that project a whole heck of a lot more feasible, especially the high grade core of that project, which is going to be important for development. But I also have to say, Argentina and its president that's been in there kicking ass and taking names has made Argentina a hotbed of investment capital. And it shows what you can do when you actually come in and you take bloated government and you make it more efficient, right? People didn't like the chainsaw approach that he took when he came in. But if you look at that country's balance sheet and you look at where it's been historically, and you look at the amount of capital that's being injected into that country's economy, you really can't argue with the results thus far as it relates to that. So Aldebaran, great copper gold asset in Argentina, a team that's familiar in South America, a team that has monetized these types of assets for $500 million to billions of dollars in the past, and a team that I think will absolutely do that with Aldebaran and the Altar United system deposit there. Any thoughts on Aldebaran?
I mean, you could have written my letter today. I mean, that was all that was without prompting. I just wrote Aldebaran on the sheet, but that's exactly what I would have said. So the only thing I'd add is that the reason I put it on the sheet is because of what you said. It's moving higher and it's going to need to finance. So there hasn't been news in a while because the drilling, I think the last holes came out in July from the last campaign, and they're going to put out a resource update. The thing's already huge. I have it here because I wrote about it today. It is 13 billion pounds of copper, 43 million ounces of silver, and 3.8 million ounces of gold. And the resource update is due out here in the next 3 months. So what I had been writing about is that they're going to need to finance, which is not a problem because they've got deep-pocketed backers. Route 1, Sibanye, and then there's another one that's escaping me off the top of my head, South 32. But I thought at least it would put some pressure on the stock because the financing would be done at cheaper prices and would allow me to buy more. In fact, that has not happened, and the reason I put it on the sheet is because it's going to close or is very close to closing at the highest it's ever been, around $1.20 Canadian. And if it does that, it could go higher, especially if you get a catalyst like a resource update. So anyway, freebie this week, which may not be free for too much longer, which is why we're sort of structured it this way and talking about companies at the end here.
Yeah, and then just to give you all some insight at where I think that company gets taken out at, it won't be at the current market cap. It'll be at least 3 times what the market cap is now. And in the copper gold market that we're getting into, it may be significantly higher than even that. So really good upside there. Another company, and this one, much different story, right? It's been quiet for the entire year. It's missed some deadlines on permitting and getting projects going, but it's finally found its footing. And then I'm talking about Latin Metals, a small, tiny company with a small, tiny market cap, just did a financing at some 8 cents. But it delivered a deal with a new private partner, a company that's got assets in different parts of the world, producing assets. And it being private is a real gift to Latin Metal shareholders in the sense that they have the balance sheet from their production profits, and they have the ability to be nimble because they don't have to go through the entire public process of making a decision that public companies have to do. So the deal that was structured is pretty significant, right? And when you tally up the underlying payments that are going to be made to vendors, which I think was $4.2 million US, the potential for Latin Metals to get $10 million if they top off their rights to earn into the bulk of the property. And then the work commitment, 60,000 meters plus of work commitments that the company will pay for. You're getting into the $30 and $40 million level of financial commitments that Latin Metal shareholders will benefit from. And then the real kicker, and the part that I really love, is looking long-term. And I know it's hard in this sector to do that, but looking long-term, no matter how much the partner company earns into, Latin Metal shareholders will go ahead and retain an NSR, right? And that 2% NSR will come on any production that results from this project in Argentina. That's Esperanza project in Argentina. And so the private company that came in wants to spend the money, wants to deliver a resource estimate, wants to deliver a feasibility study, and wants to build the damn thing. And they want to do so quickly. So that NSR could be very, very profitable very, very soon for mining timelines, and for a very, very long time, and could make Latin Metals a company that's sustainable just on that for a very, very long time. There's some other projects in there that we're waiting on partnerships and drill permits for that are also material to the company. So not just a one-trick pony. Congrats to Keith Henderson and the Latin Metals team for getting a very difficult deal across the finish line.
Yeah, long time coming. That whole group seems to have irons in the fire with Velocity Minerals recently having some news, and that might not be done yet. And then I was just looking at my notes here. You mentioned other projects. Yeah, they have another one called Organullo, that is essentially needs to get some action on it from Anglo. And so that's the reason I put it on the sheet, is because it has been such a long time coming, and it seems that finally things are starting to move on these projects. And so it is super cheap. They did just raise some money, and so I thought just worth calling out there. And then you added one more, and what else do we got to talk about?
No, I could talk Hannon all day long, right? What do you want me to tell you, people? We're waiting on the permits. The permits at Valiente, the 100% part are progressing. We're in the final stages of that. We should get a permitting decision, obviously, hopefully a favorable one from the Water Authority there soon. We have favorable decisions from the other two authorities, so that's been taken care of. But they had some IP results from Valiente, and surprise, surprise, it turns out there's, this could be a very technical term, a shit ton more targets than anybody anticipated. And interestingly to me, a shit ton more gold targets than anyone anticipated. So initially, everyone looked at Hannon as a copper play, and then they started looking at Hannon as a copper gold play with the porphyries that they discovered, up to 18 now. And now that we're actually like doing the detailed work into the individual porphyries, we're starting to get kilometer-wide projects within projects that are all separate in nature. It's one big system, but there's 5 new epithermal gold targets separate from 2 porphyry copper gold targets, right? And so when you run IP and you see the stuff lighting up like a Christmas tree everywhere, and then you match that with the geochemistry work, and you have gold and copper in soils for hundreds of meters at surface, that's, sub-economic ore, but pretty damn close. And then you extrapolate what that can mean for what's at the bottom and the grade there. The potential here, again, is unique and exceptional. And yes, it's permit dependent. That's the only thing that we're waiting on. But believe you me, the minute those permits are granted, it is go time on Hannon Metals. I couldn't be more excited as a significant shareholder and as a part of a group that has a significant shareholding in that company. And knock on wood on those permits, but the rest of that IP result survey looked amazing. More results to come from several other projects. Special situation that's developing there and could have very, very material economic benefits and impacts to a community that absolutely needs it in that part of the world.
Excellent. We were obviously just there last month, and so I'm following along with the news and looking forward to those permits as well, for sure.
That's all I got. Anything else you want to get off your chest? I got to ask you, how are those voting odds looking here after last week? I know last week they were tilted towards the Trumpster now. How's it looking now?
He's widened his lead in the betting markets quite substantially over the past couple of days. I think he's now the 55 or 56% favorite, and then Kamala's pushed down to 45. That just is what it is. I saw that some of the left-leaning sort of media outlets were trying to counter that. They were putting out lots of polls this week that were saying Kamala was, closer than people think, or she was closer in battleground states. But, the money is saying otherwise, that it's going the other way towards Trump. And that's really all I have to say about that. I don't want to pontificate on why. I mean, I have my suspicions, but he's a 55% chance to win in the betting markets. And I think, I don't know if we're doing betting predictions, but I think you'll see Trump win. I think that people think he's better for their wallet, and I think people think he's better in a war-type scenario, and it's the climate for that sort of out there right now. And when they look at Kamala and Walz, I think they don't poll as well in the economy, and they don't poll as well in any sort of, war scenario. So I just think that is what it is.
Interesting. We'll see. We've seen in this election that 30 days, a lot can happen in 30 days, right? And so,
oh man,
they might try to take the Trumpster out again. Trump might, come up with another quotable that dooms him. Who knows?
No,
it's an interesting time. It's crazy. It's bizarro.
It's still a coin flip. It's still within the margin of error for sure. I mean, it could go anyway. Yeah, people were saying that the longshoreman strike was going to be the October surprise, and we don't even remember what that was anymore. No. Right? We've had two hurricanes since then. That was going to be the October surprise. Like, I don't think we've gotten the October surprise yet. Yeah. So, no, I'm with you. I'm just sort of telling you what my gut is telling me and what the betting markets are saying. But it could definitely go either way, of course. No,
and last note, and we'll wrap up here because it's getting long in the tooth. But just condolences and all the best to everyone in North Carolina and in Florida, right? It's been a tough 30 days here as far as the weather. And, we had a friend that flew down to Florida prior to get his mom and his sister out of there, and luckily he was able to convince them to go down south and weather the storm down south, not in the path of Milton there. But yeah, all the best to everybody over there. Always tough to see anyone suffering, especially when it's not anyone that deserves it. So I'll leave that there. That's all I got, Mr. Hodge. It's been a fun one as always. Looking forward to getting back to it again next week. I hope everyone has a phenomenal week. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with Mr. Nick Hodge. This was the 288th episode of our weekly therapy session that we call Investing in Bizarro World. Send us off, Mr. Hodge.
Not a lot to add there. Best wishes to the folks in Florida and North Carolina as recovery efforts get underway. And we'll be back to you next week.
Shout out to all the military and first responders that are on the scene of that. It's appreciated, Joe.
Hey there, you independent-minded investor. If you like this video, make sure to tell us so by clicking the like button below. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another one. And share it with everyone you know on social media. You can also click the link in the description below to check out more information-packed videos just like this one. Thanks for watching.